The sky over Burkina Faso was not quiet. Heavy clouds pressed down, swollen with rain, and the first drops struck the red earth like sparks on clay. The ground turned slick, mud clinging to bare feet as rows of children stood unmoving, their small frames locked in formation. The sound of thunder rolled across the horizon, a low growl that seemed to test their silence. Their uniforms, simple tiger-stripe cloth, clung to their thin shoulders, soaked and heavy. Water streamed from brows into eyes that refused to close. They were trembling, but no one moved, no one cried. The air carried the scent of wet dust and iron, as if the land itself were remembering battles long past. From the opposite side of the field, a figure approached. Ibrahim Traoré. No polished medals gleamed on his chest. No weapon hung at his side. He wore only a faded ochre pullover and the calm intensity of a man who had carried both victory and grief. His steps made no sound in the thick mud. His presence alone seemed to straighten the line of children before him. He raised his voice, not with volume, but with weight. It struck the air like lightning. "Our enemies will not wait for you to grow up." The children blinked. Their fists tightened. The storm broke harder, wind tearing at their clothes, but his words did not scatter. He paused, then added, his tone unshaken, "So I will not wait either." In that instant, the moment shifted. This was not theater. This was not a military parade. This was a seed being pressed into the soil of young minds, a promise that discipline could grow where fear once lived. A whistle cut through the storm, sharp and final. The program had begun. Above them, a drone hummed in the clouds, its lens unblinking. Across the sea, European eyes would soon witness these images, and what they saw would ignite a storm greater than the thunder over Burkina Faso. The rain eased, but the sky remained heavy, as if the storm had simply hidden itself above the clouds. The children's drills began, arms rising and falling in sharp rhythm, bare feet slapping against the wet clay. Some stumbled, some clenched their jaws to hold back tears, yet not one stepped out of line. Their discipline was not taught with whips or rifles, but with silence and endurance. Unseen by them, the drone hovered overhead. Its metallic hum was out of place against the ancient rhythm of voices chanting in unison. Within hours, the images captured would cross oceans, uploaded by a European journalist seated in a dim hotel room. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked publish. He believed he was exposing militarization. What he did not realize was that he was setting fire to a powder trail. In Paris, the footage appeared on glowing screens. Headlines formed quickly: child soldiers in training. In Berlin, a stern-faced official declared that Burkina Faso was indoctrinating its youth. In London, commentators whispered of sanctions. Reports poured into desks at the United Nations, demanding investigations. The word education was replaced by the word threat. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore received the news in silence. A tablet was placed into his hands, its glass glowing with accusations. His aides asked if he would issue a statement, if he would defend himself before the cameras. He shook his head. His answer was simple: "We already did." But the tension grew. Western broadcasters framed the camp as a rehearsal for war. Aid groups prepared reports that spoke of indoctrinated minors. Foreign embassies whispered of plots to destabilize the government. A betrayal hung in the air, not by the children, but by lenses that refused to see dignity without suspicion. The clash was not yet fought with weapons. It began with words sharpened like blades, with rumors that spread faster than truth. And in the echo chambers of Europe, a dangerous question arose. Was Traore forging a generation of warriors against the very systems that once claimed to civilize them? The storm had passed in Burkina Faso, but across the sea, another one was gathering, one born not of rain and thunder, but of politics, fear, and control. Night fell across the camp. The storm had long departed, but the weight of its echoes still clung to the air. Lanterns burned low, throwing wavering light across rows of canvas tents. The children slept, their breathing steady, their small bodies wrapped in thin blankets. From outside, one could hear an occasional whisper, a muffled laugh, the fragile proof that youth had not yet been stolen from them. Ibrahim Traoré walked alone between the tents, his boots sinking quietly into damp soil. He did not carry guards at his side. He carried questions. The headline from Europe replayed in his mind like static. He could almost hear the voices of foreign ministers, accusations, condemnations, demands. They called it indoctrination. They called it a threat. He wondered if they had ever watched a child go hungry, if they had ever buried one who should have lived. He paused at a tent where a girl named Miriam lay with her leg wrapped in a splint. Earlier that day, she had refused to be carried from the training field, crawling through mud until she crossed the finish line. Now she slept without fear, her chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Traore's eyes softened. Was this strength, or was it cruelty, asking so much from the young? Inside his chest, two forces wrestled. One was loyalty to his people, to ancestors who had endured chains, borders, and silence. The other was the pressure of a modern world that measured dignity by the comfort of Western classrooms, by test scores and certificates. Could he defy that world without breaking under its weight? He lowered himself onto a wooden stool near the fire, staring into its restless flames. The children trusted him. The elders believed in him. Yet he knew the cost of standing against empires, even those that claimed to have faded. His name was already marked in foreign halls. Sanctions, isolation, even plots to unseat him. They were not distant possibilities. They were shadows at the edge of the firelight. For a long moment, his hand trembled as he held a scarf once belonging to his late father. He pressed it to his lips, whispering words that no one else could hear. Was sacrifice the price of memory? Was betrayal the punishment for refusing to kneel? The fire cracked, sending sparks into the dark. His eyes lifted. Beyond the camp, beyond the horizon, conflict was coming. And though his face remained calm, inside him the struggle was far from over. Morning arrived with no ceremony. The whistle blew at dawn, and the children rose in silence to wash beneath barrels of cold water. Their discipline was unchanged, their spirits unbroken. But beyond the camp, the ripples of their training were no longer contained. In the streets of Ouagadougou, families whispered with pride. Mothers who had once feared their children would vanish into poverty or violence now held their heads higher. They repeated stories of daughters who endured pain without complaint, sons who returned home speaking of ancestors not as ghosts but as guides. Local radio stations replayed the story of Miriam crawling through the mud until she finished the obstacle, calling her the girl who carried the nation's spine. But far across the sea, a different narrative sharpened. In Brussels, lawmakers argued under chandeliers about whether Burkina Faso was breeding militants under the disguise of education. In Paris, a panel of commentators dissected drone footage with cold precision, labeling the children soldiers in training. In London, aid groups drafted formal letters, demanding an immediate suspension of what they termed dangerous practices. Meanwhile, African social media platforms surged with a different energy. Hashtag Children of Dignity trended from Dakar to Nairobi. Clips of the camp. Children meditating under the rising sun, little ones carrying water for elders, voices chanting, "We kneel only to prayer, never to fear," circulated with fierce pride. For many, this was not militarization. This was reclamation. The global divide deepened. At the United Nations, ambassadors spoke with raised voices. Some denounced Traore as reckless. Others, particularly from neighboring states, defended him quietly, reminding the assembly that European nations had once trained children in their own cadet programs. The hypocrisy was not lost on anyone. Back in the camp, the press arrived uninvited. Cameras turned to capture children standing straight in the heat, eyes steady. A French journalist confronted Traore directly. "Are you preparing these miners for war?" His response was calm, his tone carrying the weight of a hammer without raising its edge. "We are teaching them not to break. We are teaching them how to live without bowing." The footage spread like wildfire. Across Africa, applause. Across Europe, alarm. What had begun as a local program of resilience had become a fault line in global politics. And in the shadows of Western offices, quiet meetings were called. Some officials wanted sanctions. Others asked an unsettling question: what if their children grow stronger than ours? The debate was still raging abroad when the first crack appeared inside the story itself. A file leaked late one night, not from Ouagadougou, not from a dissident group, but from a European capital. The document carried the seal of a ministry, stamped and official. Its content stunned even those accustomed to political theater. The file revealed that several European governments, behind closed doors, were not preparing to condemn the program at all. They were quietly studying it. Internal memos spoke of replication models, resilience curriculums, and pilot initiatives. A line in one report read coldly, "Their children endure more in 4 weeks than ours do in 4 years. We must adapt before we fall behind." The revelation struck like a lightning bolt. The same nations that condemned the camp publicly were secretly drafting plans to imitate it. What they had labeled indoctrination on television was being rewritten as innovation in their private archives. But that was not the only shock. In Ouagadougou, intelligence officers uncovered something else. A journalist embedded near the camp was not simply documenting. He was transmitting encrypted messages to a foreign agency. The transmissions contained maps of the compound, rosters of instructors, and assessments of Traoré's movements. When confronted, the man confessed under pressure. He was not only a reporter, he was an informant, sent to find weaknesses in the program and to exploit them. News of his exposure traveled quickly through the capital. Some demanded punishment. Others demanded his release, fearing international uproar. Traoré remained silent for hours, then addressed his advisers with a voice like stone. "We do not need to strike. We only need to show the world what was attempted here. Betrayal is its own confession." The decision was made. The spy was expelled, not imprisoned. Cameras filmed his departure, his face pale as he boarded a plane under watchful eyes. The footage circulated globally within hours. Commentators erupted, some claiming this proved Western meddling, others insisting Burkina Faso had staged the event. Yet the deeper revelation was not in the expulsion itself. It was in the whispers that followed. For the first time, African ministers from several nations reached out to Traoré in solidarity, speaking openly of collaboration. "Asterisk if they are already copying us in secret," one advisor from West Africa told him. "Then perhaps it is time we lead openly together." The twist had shifted the ground. What began as condemnation had turned into quiet admiration, and now into something far more dangerous to the old order, an alliance waiting to be born. The sun was setting when the children were called into the courtyard. Shadows stretched long across the clay, the air heavy with the smell of smoke from evening fires. Elders from nearby villages stood in a circle, their faces lit by torches, their voices carrying old songs that had not been sung in decades. Traoré stepped forward, not in uniform, but in a plain tunic woven by village hands. He carried no script, no prepared statement. In his arms he held a small carved drum, its skin stretched tight, its surface etched with patterns of rivers and suns. He placed it on the ground before the children and knelt. His words were simple, yet they pierced the silence. They tried to name you soldiers. They tried to call you weapons. But you are neither. You are memory that refuses to vanish. One by one, the children placed their hands on the drum. Small palms, scarred fingers, trembling but steady. Together they struck it, not with a rhythm of marching, but with a heartbeat of something older, unity that did not require approval, courage that did not ask for permission. The sound rose, not as thunder, but as a pulse that seemed to call the ground awake. In Europe, screens replayed the footage within hours. Some mocked the ritual as theater. Others fell into uneasy silence. But in villages across Africa, the sound of that drum was echoed with their own. Men, women, and children struck pots, skins, and tables, answering a call that crossed borders without needing passports. Traoré did not raise his fist. He did not shout. He simply closed his eyes and listened, as if he were hearing not only the children before him but generations that had been silenced and were now returning through sound. When the last echo faded, a boy named Idrissa stepped out from a formation. His voice was steady. "Captain, if they come again, will we stand?" Traoré looked at him for a long moment, then answered, "We will not just stand. We will walk forward." The torches flickered. The drum remained at the center, glowing faintly in the firelight. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in offices filled with maps and strategies, powerful men and women shifted uneasily in their chairs, realizing that the children of Burkina Faso had just made a vow the world could no longer ignore. Fade to black.